understanding.
Kia ora. Kia ora, thanks, Thor. Really appreciate that. Please stay standing, and I'll ask Councillor Gilchrist and if there's any others to lead us in our waiata.
Your mic.
I don't think we want that. E re re ra e aku wa e Māori e maringi atura kia koto e. E re re ra e aku wa e Māori e maringi atura kia koto e. Rangi tata ki runga puri ora ki raro te tai o arai te uru ki waho e. E re re ra e aku wai ni e.
Kia ora, thanks team, please be seated.
Cancer Society or the ACAN? I've got presentations.
Yes, we might go. Yeah. Kia ora tātou, nā mai haere mai, welcome everybody. Got apologies from Councillor Parker and Wayne O'Donnell from the Community Board in Geraldine. Can I have a move for that? Councillor Oliver and Councillor Gilchrist. Actually, just wait till Andrew comes back. Apologies, getting ahead. Sorry, so Oliver and Gilchrist. Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Cool. So we've got public forum now, and so we'll invite a team from ECAN to come up on air quality, and then we'll be followed by the Cancer Society. Welcome. Floor was yours, and Andrew's just getting the presentation ready.
Yeah, kia ora koutou, ko Paul Hopwood, aho. Nice Paul Hopwood. I'm a Principal Implementation Advisor with Environment Canterbury, and with me today I've got Mark Barassa, who's a Senior Air Quality and Compliance Advisor. Thank you. And hopefully online we've got Angie Scott, who's the team leader for our air quality science team, and Teresa Abacane, I believe is joining us too. I've got some apologies from Brian Reeves, who's the regional lead based in Timaru. So he was hoping to come and join us today, but he's unwell.
Yeah, great. And sorry, I'd just like to acknowledge we've got Councillor Scott in the background there as well. So thanks for joining us today, Pete.
Yeah, so today we're going to run through a presentation, myself and Angie, and we'll be talking about some of the science information around air quality in the Timaru district, patterns that we've seen in recent years, and operational actions that we're taking to air quality. So I'll drive the presentation, but I'll hand over to Angie for the first part of the presentation.
Kia ora, thank you, Paul. Yeah, thank you for the first slide. Environment Canterbury monitors air quality in a number of different areas across Canterbury. There's 8 different areas that we monitor, and we call those areas airsheds. And in the Timaru district, we've got 3 different areas where we monitor. So we've got a Timaru airshed, we have the Washdyke airshed, and the Geraldine airshed. This slide shows you where the location of our Timaru monitoring site, which is at Anzac Square, and it also shows you the Washdyke sites. Now we've moved our Washdyke site, so we originally monitored at Washdyke Flat Road, and then in about 2019 we moved that monitoring site further into the Washdyke area at the Alpine site. So they're the 3 sites that they're the Washdyke and Timaru are the 2 sites that we'll mainly focus on, but I will talk a little bit about Geraldine as well. Next slide, please, Paul. At each of our air sheds and in our different monitoring areas, we measure a range of different pollutants. And the pollutant that's of greatest concern, that tends to be an issue in our air sheds and across a lot in New Zealand actually, is what we call particulate matter. So particulate matter is all these particles that are in the air, and they are a range of different sizes and shapes and come from different sources. Now, we focus on a group of particles that are called PM10, or that's particulate matter that's smaller than 10 micrometers in diameter. So they're quite small particles, and they are the ones that can get inhaled and have human health impacts. So that's what we focus on in terms of our measurement. And at the national level, we've had national environmental standards have been set for PM10. So it's all those particles less than 10 micrometers in diameter. Now, within PM10, we also measure two different size groups of particles. We've got the fine particles, which are the very smallest ones. So they're all the particles that are less than 2.5 micrometers in diameter. So they're very fine particles, and they tend to they come from combustion sources, any sort of burning of wood, coal, petrol, or diesel, and those are taken in further into the lungs and have more harm on your health. So we measure those fine particles, but we also measure what we call coarse particles. So those are that are between the 2.5 micrometers in diameter to PM10. So again, to say, just to reiterate, PM10 is made up of those very fine ones, the 2.5 PM2.5 particles, and then the coarse particles, which are between 2.5 and 10. And those coarse particles, they come from completely different sources generally to the PM2.5. So they don't tend to be the combustion ones. They're ones that are more of crustal origin. So things like dust, soil, sea salt and things like that. So it's quite different to those combustion ones, which are the very small ones. And what we find is that the coarse particles, they don't tend to vary that much during the year. They're fairly they go up and down depending on what the weather's doing and what's sort of going on, but they don't have any sort of seasonal pattern as such. Whereas the fine particles, PM2.5, they do have quite a seasonal pattern. So especially in our urban areas, so we're any built up areas really, and that's mostly because in winter, the amount of fine particles that are emitted increases substantially because people are burning wood and coal, well, mostly wood actually, to heat their homes. And it's also the time of year when dispersion is limited, so the particles don't tend to blow away as much as what they would, say, in summer, for example, when there's a lot more wind about. Yeah, so that's the one that we focus on. And like I said, PM10, we have a national environmental standard for that, and we'll be talking about that in the next few slides. So if you could go on to the next one, please, Paul. This slide gives you just a bit of an overview of how we're going in terms of when we compare ourselves to a national environmental standard at our 3 airsheds. So the Timaru being the blue dots, Geraldine the red, and our wash dikes, the concentrations from the measurements from our wash dike site are shown in the brown sort of colour. What we're looking at here in this graph is for each year, so we've got the years along the bottom, the number of days when we've exceeded our 24-hour average concentration limit of 50 micrograms per cubic metre. So that standard says on any given day, you need to be below 50 micrograms per cubic metre, except for one day a year. We're allowed one day a year that goes above that concentration. And as you can see in this graph, like if we look at the Timaru line, it goes up and down, it's a bit variable. And that's, it can be for a range of reasons. It could be because of emissions, or it could be because of weather conditions in any given year. But we've had quite a lot of improvement over time. So from 1999 down to 2021, we can see it has decreased substantially. But by about 2018, we can see that the number of days above the standard has sort of levelled out a bit. Then if we look at the wash dike lines, we can see it's been split into two. So we've got an earlier section that's really low, that has a low number of days above the standard, that sort of tracks the red line. That was at our old Washdyke site, which happened to be just out of Washdyke itself. And then we moved the site into Washdyke, further into Washdyke, and the 3 dots that you can see that look like they're increasing from about 2019 are from the new Washdyke site at Alpine, our Alpine site. Now, the thing to note with those 3 is that the first dot is missing a fair amount of data. So that level, so those number of days there is an underestimate what it would have been if we had the full data set available for that year. And then for Geraldine, that's the red line, we can see that there are a very low number of days above the standard. So if we're comparing the 3 sites, we can see that, say if we just looked at 2021, that we are getting, or there's up to 30 days above the standard at Washdyke in 2021, more than 10 at Timaru, whereas at Geraldine, there are none, I don't think, in that particular year. So it is certainly a lot lower than what it is at the 2 Timaru sites. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're just going to focus in on each of those areas just to give you a little bit more information. We're going to start by looking at the Timaru site. So the first graph, the one at the top, it shows you the daily concentrations. So it is these daily concentrations that need to be below 50. So if you can see on the graph, there's a line at 50, and we need to be below, the concentrations need to be below that line. This graph shows data from the older Grey Road site. So that got changed in sort of the mid-2000s to Anzac Square, which are the black columns. So it's showing you every daily concentration. And along the top of that graph, the red numbers, they refer to the number of days that are above the standard. So they're the numbers that are pretty much, that were in the graph that I just showed you before, just so you can see what those numbers are. And I can't actually see, I can't see anything beyond 2017, 18, 2019 because the pictures are in the way. But anyway, it shows that the concentrations have decreased substantially over time in Timaru, at the Timaru site, but we're still getting quite a few numbers of days that are above. The second graph, the one at the bottom, is showing the daily concentrations only in 2021. So it's just showing you every single day over the year. And what this one highlights is how it shows fine particle concentrations, so the black part of the columns, and then the brown part of the columns is actually the coarse particles, and together they make up the PM10. And what it shows is that if you look at the dark columns, you can see that it's definitely it's a lot lower during the warmer summer months than what it is in winter. And in winter, the concentrations increase, PM2.5 concentrations increase substantially, and it pushes up the PM10 above the NESAC daily PM10 line. So that is the standard, that red line that's across the top there. And we also have on there the Canterbury Air Regional Plan regulation for daily PM2.5, which is 25 micrograms per cubic metre. That's something that's in our air plan, and we are working towards achieving that by 2030. And if you look at that line, you can see that there are many days when the black PM2.5 columns are above that particular target. So yeah, so you can see that we still have a fair way to go in terms of Timaru to meet though the national standard and to meet the target in our CARP. Next slide, please. This second slide shows you the results for Geraldine. Now, Geraldine happens to be a similar sort of site to the Timaru one in that they are both what we call residential sites. So they're located in our urban areas, in our residential areas. And this one, it shows you the daily PM10 concentrations. Again, similar sort of graph at the top. It's got the NESAC target with the line across at 50 micrograms per cubic metre, and the number of days along the very top in red, showing that over time, again, we've had a reasonable amount of reduction. The concentrations have come down, and they've come down to the point that it is well within the one day per year that's been allowed for in our national environmental standards. So we've had at least 5 years, I think, that have been within that. The second graph again is looking at the PM2.5 concentrations in 2021 and the coarse component of that. Similarly to Timaru, even though the concentrations aren't as high, we can see that during that winter period, the PM2.5 concentrations climb, and they are much higher, and they push up the daily concentrations, the PM10 concentrations. It is well within the NESAC daily PM10 limit, but we're still getting some exceedances of the CARP daily PM2.5. So if we can now have a look at the next slide. So we're talking about wash dyke last, mainly because wash dyke is a different sort of site to the other two. So Timaru and Geraldine were residential, whereas the wash dyke site is an industrial site. And what we see in the concentrations is quite different to what we see in our residential areas. Again, the first graph is looking at the PM10 concentrations for every single day. The grey columns refer to our old measurements at the wash dyke flat road site. The black columns to the Alpine site. So in earlier years at the wash dyke flat site, we had some exceedances of the PM10 standard. So those numbers across the top again indicate the numbers of exceedances in each year. So we were getting up to like 6 is about the highest that we've got there, but it was quite infrequent. Whereas if you look at the Alpine site, you can see that there are many more exceedances at that particular location above the 50 micrograms per cubic metre. The second graph is also it's the same graph that you saw for Geraldine and for Timaru, where we're showing the fine particle concentrations and we're showing the coarse particle component of PM10 as well. And you can see that unlike the Timaru and Geraldine site, which had had increases during that wintertime period in the PM2.5, you don't see that at wash dyke. And the main reason for that is that there aren't as many, it's not as built up in terms of housing and people using their wood burners. So you don't see that impact on those concentrations. There are some, but not so many. But what you also see is that the coarse particle component of PM10, the brown, is much higher than what it was at the other sites. And it is certainly well over the PM10 target line, the NESAC target at 50 micrograms per cubic metre. And then if you look at the CARP daily PM2.5 line, there are very few, I can't actually see if any, instances where the PM2.5 was above that line. So that's quite different to what we see at our other sites. Last slide, I think, for me. So just to sum up, what we've pulled together here is just a little comparison of differences between the Timaru and the wash dyke site. It's important to remember that they have different land use. Timaru is a residential site, wash dyke is an industrial site. In terms of emission sources, home heating is a very large component of what's going on within Timaru urban area. But there's also some emissions will come from like port activities, industrial boilers, but not to the same extent. They're least significant compared to what home heating is actually doing in Timaru. And then wash dyke is industrial. Industrial area, there's a lot of unpaved areas, there's a lot of dust movements, vehicle movements on unpaved areas, and there's also a little bit of influence, sea salt influence from the coast. As I indicated in the graphs, some of the key differences in terms of what we're measuring is that most of the particles in Timaru are fine PM2.5 particles, so they are mostly of combustion sources. Those particles are mostly highest at night. They can occur any day of the week. So day of the week has no influence on it whatsoever. But they mostly occur in winter. There might be some occasional outside winter, but generally it's a wintertime issue, nighttime issue, and it can occur any day of the week. Whereas wash dyke, most of the particles are coarse, so of soil, dust, sea salt origin. They tend to occur, they are highest during the day. They are usually highest on weekdays, and they can occur any time of the year. So there's some key differences there. The work that we've done to date looking at the particles at wash dyke and looking at the size of the particles, looking at the diurnal patterns in the measurements, looking at the wind data, and also some elemental filter work that we've done indicates that, you know, the coarse PM at wash dyke, it comes from many sources. Like, it doesn't come from one particular direction. It can come from any direction. It can occur when winds are light. It can occur when winds are also strong. But what we are seeing is that it tends to be mostly of soil and road dust origin. I think a lot of it will be vehicle movements on dusty roads and unpaved areas. And there is also a little bit of a sea salt component, but that is much less than the vehicle movement on roads, which is why you see that strong day of week pattern. And I think that's all for me. Thank you, Paul.
Right, thanks, Angie. So I'll run through a few slides talking about our planning and operational initiatives to address air quality. And I'll start with Timaru. So within our polluted air sheds, we have rules and policies in our plans to deal with air quality. And within those air sheds, it's particularly around transitioning to cleaner forms of home heating, better burning, using good quality dry fuel, and better burning technique to reduce smoke from home heating. And there are also resource consent requirements for larger scale and industrial discharges to air from industry and so on. As Angie's pointed out, we've made some significant gains in Timaru in air quality in recent years, but it does look as though the PM10 and the PM2.5 levels have plateaued and are potentially increasing. So we're interested in what the reasons for that might be. There was a very focused effort in Timaru in the years up to 2019 with the Canterbury Regional Air Plan coming into place, with removing older forms of home heating, with flyer drops and education to people with smoky chimneys. There's been less of that in the last couple of years. The team reduced in recent years, and we haven't had people out looking for smoky chimneys in the last couple of years, and we wonder whether that's a factor in changing behaviour and increasing smoke from home heating. Also, the availability of fuel. Wood can be expensive. People that don't have their own source of firewood, and we have had examples of very poor quality roadside sales of firewood, and we wonder if there are some opportunities to work with Timaru District Council to reduce the availability of roadside sales, unregulated sales of firewood. We promote our Good Wood scheme, where we have retailers around the region where we audit, and we're confident that they're selling good quality dry firewood. But there may be other less scrupulous wood sales online and on the roadside. We also provide support and advice to people to get better value from their home heating. So we have a Warmer Cheaper campaign, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. We have a response to complaints that come through to our customer services department about smoky chimney complaints, and provide education to homeowners and tenants there. We have a subsidy scheme to support people to transition to cleaner forms of home heating. And we have a partnership with Energy Smart based in Timaru to provide home heating advice. But yeah, based on the data from our solid fuel burning database, it looks as though and from census data, it looks like there are still around 40% of households in Timaru that use wood as a heating source. So we're looking to improve how we can use those statistics. Within wash dyke, I apologise on these slides. I think the formatting of some of the text has changed in transferring they should look the same as your PDFs and your packs. In wash dyke, primarily industrial sources, and we have resource consents that we issue for large scale emissions there. and we have an incident response approach for dust complaints and so on. And we'd like to explore how Timaru District Council and ECAN can work together to reduce dust in that industrial area. We have a partnership currently working on stormwater impacts in the Washdyke, Waitalakau catchment. And these are really similar issues around unconsolidated areas, pollutants from roading and unconsolidated surfaces. So we think there's some opportunities there to work together with TDC and with landowners to improve site practices and try and reduce dust from some of these sites. In terms of our communications and engagement approach, in recent years we've run the Warmer Cheaper campaign, so you might see some adverts. We're focusing on South Canterbury and Timaru in particular this year with some social media and printed press adverts. And this is around having a friendly, educative approach to better home heating, to make sure that people get the best value from their home heating, and can teach people how to burn smoke-free, so we can improve air quality in our air sheds. And again, the focus is there around good burning technique, and there are some good tutorials and so on online there, and using good, dry, well-seasoned firewood. So what's ahead? What can we do to improve air quality further? We've made some good gains in recent years, but it's clear there's more work that we need to do together. We've been looking at reviewing our subsidy scheme to improve the accessibility and uptake of the scheme. We haven't had many applications for subsidies in recent years, and that's most likely linked to not having such intensive compliance approaches to encouraging people to swap out older forms of wood burners. But we're aware there are still a large number of potentially older burners in Timaru that may or may not be in use. So we're looking to do some more work on there. And we did a small scale mail out pre-winter this year, and we did get some responses with people that had stopped using older burners and replaced them with heat pumps, for example. But I think we do need to do some more focus on areas with poor air quality. Timaru is one area in Canterbury where that's the case, and where there are other districts in the region where so air quality is not meeting the national and regional plan standards. So the focus there would be around education, and also focusing on properties with expired or expiring wood burners, or people that are emitting larger amounts of smoke. So we want to explore some other initiatives to get more impact and reduce smoke from properties. We're maintaining our smoky chimney complaint response, so that's been very effective. Mark and Mike and the team and Noah in Christchurch providing education and support to people to burn better. And we also have our incident response approach for outdoor burns and dust complaints. And this is my last slide, just briefly talking about the interagency approach around crop residue burning. And this relates to Timaru and Waimate areas where we have crop residue buffers and partnerships with Foundation for Arable Research and Fed Farmers and FENS to provide advice on better burning. And we have rules in our plans around having smoke management plans for crop burning to try and reduce smoke impacts on our towns. And we do an annual media release and a mail out to farmers to provide some advice and education there. Once again, our staff undertake proactive monitoring where we know there are burns and respond to complaints. So that's the end of our presentation, and we'd be very happy to take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Really informative as always. Really enjoy the update. Councillor Wills, question from you.
Thank you. Just going back to the improving the equality, interestingly enough, when we talk about the education versus enforcement, have you got resources to be able to manage it moving forward into the future? Is it something that's going to be developed on, as in staffing requirements? Or?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we're looking to increase our resourcing around education and compliance. So Mark and Mike, they have a combined role providing better burning advice, but also a compliance role to deal with non-compliant burners or people that are emitting excess smoke. So Mike Lewis, who's here with us today, has just recently been employed, and we're looking to employ another member of staff next year to try and build up our resourcing.
Right, I know that's good. Thank you.
Councillor Booth.
I think you've been reasonably tough on yourself, actually. I mean, I'm looking at that blue line, it's actually coming down quite nicely. So, and I just wonder about your results from the Anzac Square. How up to date are these figures here?
Might refer that one to Angie, I think.
Stu,
You're on mute.
oh, you're on mute.
There you go. I'm just unmuted myself. Now, which blue are you referring to? The blue line in the
Timaru Anzac Square.
yeah. So the air quality monitoring.
How current are they?
How current are they?
What's
It's up to
most current?
2021.
So have you got this year's numbers? How often do you check it?
How often do we check it today?
Okay, so
Can
so,
I,
okay, so,
this
Yep.
this is Teresa Abakan. I can tell you that the concentrations on the next slide, so the one that had Timaru, that had the concentration up until Sunday. So yesterday's concentration was lower than the guideline. We've had 2 exceedances so far this winter. So you can see those concentrations in one of the graphs, slide 5. I have it up to the last hour.
okay, so well, I guess where I'm going with this is that the Timaru Hospital have 2 months ago turned off their boilers and are using electricity. So has there been a noticeable difference in your numbers over that period in the last 2 months?
That's really hard to tell in terms of the weather. We wouldn't expect to have concentrations high outside of the winter period anyway.
Yeah, okay, well,
Yeah,
I
and
guess
it's something that is influenced by weather. So it's like one of those things that it would take some time to tell, like it wouldn't be immediate.
yeah, okay, no, that's fine. I guess we'd see the results of that in the coming months, won't we? Whether that's influenced the what is happening at Anzac Square, or perhaps as a reflection of Timaru in general.
It's a good question. Just park it for 12 months' time and we'll get the next up.
Thanks, Nigel. Well, and wash dike. You've put the monitoring station right in amongst all the main processors, manufacturers, and I guess most of the particles are big, so therefore it's actually not really coming from them as such. It's more so coming from the general dust and rubbish in the area. Would that be a fair comment?
Yes, I think that would. It's generally a dusty area and it's coming from all over the place. You can't pinpoint one particular place over another. So yeah, I'd definitely say it's just dusty.
I guess there has been some improvements there
Oh, sorry, Councillor Oliver, can you just jump out? Thanks.
with the energy plant, that the energy centre out there converting a certain percentage of their coal-fired to wood chip as well. So perhaps there'll be a reflection. That's probably only occurred in the last year. So perhaps that may affect things as well, perhaps in the finer materials. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Yeah, it's more likely to impact on the fine particles than on the coarse ones, which are the main problem that we have at Wash Strike.
Yeah, I think it just really reflects the complexity of analysing air quality data, because it is diffuse, particularly when we're looking at kind of air quality within the airshed. It's quite tricky to pinpoint the impact of kind of individual sources. But yeah, I think the data that Angie showed is certainly within the city. Most of those sources are from primary home heating, just given that kind of that winter peak. And in terms of Wash Dyke, based on observations, I think with the Waitarakau stormwater work, it does look as though there's sort of dust and mud being tracked off industrial sites and onto the road, and that's I think where you get a lot of that kind of diffuse dust and things being raised into the air. So it's quite diffuse, but there might be some improvements through site management, maybe having sort of wheel washers and rumble strips and things like that to try and reduce some of that tracking.
Yeah, Paul, and you've highlighted that as far as TDC can working together, which makes good sense. If we had those conversations at office level, at this point we have.
I don't believe we have actually. The focus of the Waitarakawa working group has been on stormwater, but yeah, we're keen to explore how we can include some like dust management within the work plan.
Yeah, cool, thank you. Go now to Councillor Oliver.
Just want to know, how are you capturing those people that are using the expired burners, and how are you enforcing it?
That's Mark actually.
Basically, our database indicates which ones do have expired burners. What we don't know is if they've actually transitioned to heat pumps, for example. So basically with that database, and this year what was decided was to send letters out at this point, a pilot to some of these households and gathering data to see whether they actually have transitioned or not. We can follow up on those, but what we've chosen is a pretty soft approach this year with not necessarily getting out and observing people. We had at an executive level that we really didn't want to be intrusive to the community. So we're not out there with our infrared cameras determining whether they're using them or not. What we are doing is following up on smoky chimneys, the complaints, and while we're out there, we'll be keeping an eye on things.
Okay. Do you have a rough idea of what percentage of expired burners are still out there?
Well, I think Paul indicated there was potentially 40%, and we've been working really hard on our database to get that right. What we don't know is of that percentage which are actually in use. The information that I'm getting from, say, Energy Smart and other sources, that there's been a significant change into heat pumps, but we just don't have that data because that's not a consentable item.
Yeah, our database indicates that in Timaru there may be 2,000 expired burners. But again, we don't know if they're actually there or in use. Some of them may have been replaced.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Yeah, interesting challenge to get that data set, isn't it? To your point, you don't need a consent to remove it. So, Councillor Piddington.
What is your current home heating scheme? Because you're talking about accessibility and uptake of the scheme. And the second part of that, you used to have quite a successful scheme that you dropped. So you've got the answer. It's just really whether you're willing to fund it or not, don't you?
Yeah, so we still have the subsidy scheme, so that's still operating, and that's based on a targeted rate. And so the availability of that, so it's accessible to people with a community services card, and it's administered by Energy Smart, based in Timaru. The other scheme that we had, which was a rates advanced scheme, that was the Healthy Homes Canterbury scheme. So that's under review at the moment, based on some issues with the, I've forgotten the term now, but it's a finance commission issue that came down from a similar scheme that's run in Auckland. So that's just on hold while we review that at the moment. But yeah, we'd like to be able to extend the subsidy scheme and improve the accessibility. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we want to be able to support people to transition to home heating.
There also is the national program, the ECA program, and also when there are deprivation zones, those people are automatically eligible, so they don't necessarily need the community service card.
Yeah, and just a note on some of that ECA funding, there has been some big notable changes out in Washdyke itself, which over time will, I think, as far as the Scows and others. So which is great to have that funding come locally. Just one question from me in regards to the roadside sales that you talked about. What are the tools in the toolbox, around that the wet wood and what have you? Because it's not an easy one to actually get compliance with, is it?
That's an excellent question, and we've had concerns about that for a number of period of time. When Top Cut left a little over 2 years ago, almost 3 years ago, there was 6,000 cubic meters that he used to deliver that was good quality wood. That vacuum was pretty significantly filled by people that were selling, just off the side of the road. What we would find is sometimes the testing on the side of the road was actually good, but what was delivered was not good. So we've actually, been very willing to support the public by testing their wood, giving them certified copies of what we have tested, with them the ability to then go back to the supplier and or see if they could either get their money back or the wood replaced. And if that's in the absence of that, they could use this document to take them to small claims court. that has been taken up some, but not as much as it could. So again, that's kind of like a shot across the bow of them. But what we also do know is, I know a few years ago, we weren't allowed to sell cars along the side of the road. But then the question is, if you can't sell a car along the side of the road, why is it available that somebody could sell wood alongside of the road? We would actually like to take these people that are doing this under our umbrella, because we audit twice a year to make sure the quality of the wood is good. And, you know, without any kind of pressures on them, basically, you know, it's cashies, and they're making some good money by finding wood. Unfortunately, the quality is not what we would like. We also know that this year is a challenging year. It was a great year for growing wood, or for growing grass this summer, not seasoning wood. So even some of our good wood suppliers are struggling a little bit. So we know that across the region, it's going to be a challenging winter as far as having wood that's of good quality.
Yeah,
Yeah, and of course, there's nothing stopping people from buying wood that's a bit damp, you know, on the premise that they're going to, you know, going to season it for, you know, and use it in the subsequent season. But you know, if people are buying wood at this time of year, typically, you know, it's because they need to use it straight away.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, and as far as that selling from the side of the road, that's bylaw, or effectively does that sit under? Yeah, okay. No worries. Further questions? I've got Councillor Booth and then Councillor Burke.
Well, just considering that the moisture appears to be still the main culprit for the smoke. What if you were to empower the people and so simply give them a low cost moisture meter, access to it for nothing, and just so they can actually hold the wood supply to account themselves without a third party having to be involved?
Yeah, these moisture meters are actually quite available now. They cost about $40. You can get them from DIY store. But yes, certainly. But we do offer, as Mark mentioned, we do offer to test wood on people's behalf. But yeah, it's an interesting idea though, just to increase the accessibility for these moisture meters. That's something we can certainly look into.
Councillor Burt.
Without trying to stretch your knowledge on the RMA, we know that at Washdyke there's a lot of industrial activity that goes on there all the time. A lot of it is regulated by consent, and a lot of that is around discharge to air and what have you. And with that, we also know that there's a lot of unconsolidated area there with lots of transportation, a lot of truck movements and what have you, and obviously being on the coast, significant winds and what have you. That a lot of that is caused by the unconsolidated area and truck movement. In terms of aspects of the RMA control that, and therefore, has there been any decision or any discussion around potentially looking at how that could be enforced under the RMA in terms of that discharge?
Good question, Councillor. That potentially there might be something we look into for future plan changes with the air plan. You know, you could potentially have controls around, and we certainly, I think we do for other kind of excavations or subdivisions and so on. There are kind of area limits, you know, to 2 hectare limits for triggering resource consent. So that's a possibility. I don't think we have anything like that currently in the plan. It's really around whether there's an adverse effect beyond the boundary, which again is quite subjective.
Cheers, thank you.
My new colleague, Mike, took him out to Washdyke, and we actually did quite a loop around there, and I've spent quite a bit of time out in Washdyke, and I did show them these areas where basically, you know, there's a lot of dirt there. Trucks get in them on muddy days and bring it out to there. And basically, he has a background, and he said, maybe we can get WorkSafe involved. So that's another area that we're starting to pursue, because again, there's going to be workers in there, and they're going to be also breathing this dust, and potentially it could be a WorkSafe area. We don't know a work health issue. And so we're going to take a look at that.
Hard to differentiate between causation and specific to a boundary. So yeah, it'd be very difficult. But the other area there is there's a lot of dust anyway, and a lot of it may not be, it's just that coastal. Having worked there for quite a period of time for a contractor, there wouldn't be the average day that goes by that you just have a massive wind take dust right through the whole area, and you know, and it could be a bit of everything, including, so it's not just the old truck movers. But thank you very much for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's no further questions, is there? I know Councillor Riley wanted to ask a question through me. He just always feels like he's left out that Temuka doesn't have an airshed. So if that's something you could consider into the future, but outside of that, really appreciate you coming in.
It's the pure people, pure air, Your Worship. Thank you for raising the issue.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And those online as well. Thanks, Angie and Teresa. Alrighty, move now to Claire and from the Cancer Society, and you've got a paper in front of you as well. I think everyone, you should all have one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Welcome, Martin, and the floor's yours.
Koutou, Worship Mayor, member of the council, Martin Ho, Cancer Society, Canterbury West Coast Division, and thank you for this opportunity to brief you on the forthcoming smoke-free legislation and the opportunity for councils to be part. Thank you very much. Just by way of brief introduction, the smoke-free goal has been with us for 11 years. It was announced in 2011. It's a goal to reduce smoking prevalence in adults to under 5%. Now, since 2011, a number of things have happened, a number of milestones in tobacco control, not least the significant role of local authorities in promoting smoke-free outdoor areas. I'm really happy to say, congratulate TDC for being an early leader in Canterbury. Your policy is comprehensive, and the policy that you've adopted is one across the land that is seen to be extremely acceptable, not only by residents, but also increasingly by commercial retailers, where we're seeing smoke-free outdoor dining promoted. I'm really also pleased to see the support for a review of the policy, which we welcome, and the move to consider vaping as part of your policy and the potential for a smoke-free, vape-free Stafford Street. Above all, you've shown leadership, so thank you. To put it in context, we now see since 2011, nearly all councils in the Motu have actually adopted some form of outdoor policy. These are almost universally voluntary and have been shown to be, as I say, acceptable. This is a graphic that was produced in 2020. I'm in the process of updating this with colleagues around the country, and the smoke-free 2025 endorsement, that is the support. I've had the pleasure to go through all the council policies in the country, and there are now over 60% of councils specifically reference their own community visions and strategies to that, with the aspirations for a smoke-free future, which is significant. We're also seeing a significant growth in the vape-free policies. The 33% is likely to be approaching 50% in the new draft. Against the voluntary policies that we're seeing at local level, we're seeing the legislation at national level. Now, the legislation that's slated for 22 has come out this month. This has been presented, and we're expecting in July consultation to open to the public. Specifically, the smoke-free amendments to the existing legislation focus on three things. They significantly limit the number of retailers able to sell tobacco. Currently, there's something like 6,000 or 7,000 retailers of tobacco in our country. I have to say 6 to 7 or maybe 8 because we don't know. There is no license. Whilst tobacco is enforced in the legislation around the sale, there is no license to where it is sold. The second area that the legislation is intending to look at is creating what we call the smoke-free generation. That is, any member of the public born after 2009, when they turn 18, that is 2027, will find that they are prohibited from buying tobacco. We feel that this is a significant signal to society that a smoke-free generation is what we aspire to. And lastly, recognizing that tobacco is an addiction, we are going to see tobacco with substantial reductions of nicotine and the flavorings to become low nicotine. So those are the three planks of the policy. but there is a key role for local authorities. One of the things, although the smoke-free action plan in the tobacco network round was universally welcomed, if there was one slight criticism, it is that it omitted the critical role of local authorities. I think you were neglected in the plan. Local authorities, as we've seen, have created significant smoke-free and vape-free space in our communities. And the purpose of today is to endorse this and also to call on council to consider making a submission. Because of your smoke-free environments and the consistency that you see that with healthy communities, and this is obviously familiar to you in terms of Timaru, but as I say, I've been through all of the council policies, and you can't fail to see the consistency with however councils see their futures. It aligns very, very well with smoke-free and vape-free. But looking at the legislation itself, the first reading of the legislation means that we're going to trigger a select committee and a public consultation. And I'm connected with your staff and ensuring that the consultation window, when it is opened, we will notify you of and provide you with a briefing. And we very much hope that the council, or potentially within the region, one of my colleagues will be briefing at the Mayoral Forum Policy meeting coming up, there is an opportunity there. Whichever suits council, we feel that this is an opportunity to voice the smoke-free future from Timaru within that legislation. And lastly, the view that the Cancer Society takes is that we know that cancer prevention is a significant part of our future. We know that the registrations of cancer are likely to go up from the current 25,000 a year to something like 35,000. With the publication of the Cancer Prevention Report in February, it can't fail anybody that looks at it to see that there is a significant role for the shapers of the environment, the local authorities. And we welcome the opportunity alongside that with the changing health landscape and also the local government review to sit with your council in 2023 to look at a strategic plan together as to how we can work across a number of those factors to make our communities helpful and healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions, team? I think we'll be very much supportive of where you're heading, and also as far as any review of our own policies, including such things as vape-free makes really good sense. And just from a personal point of view, my father's anniversary of his death is on this Friday. Died 5 years ago of lung cancer, and smoked his entire life. So it does certainly mean something to me, and it just feels like, you know, smoke pre-25 is still a bit of a, shouldn't say it, but pipe dream. Do you like that one, Councillor Burt? But it just feels like we're not moving fast enough. Although there's been, you know, what you've presented, there's going to be some great changes. It just still feels like we're not going to quite get to where we need to be.
Now, this is the game changer.
Yeah.
Now, this is the policy will put New Zealand right at the top of the policy ladder, and it's already being cited by other countries such as the UK. They're citing the New Zealand plan. Many countries are now starting to have game plans around 2025. We know as a country, smoking is a leading cause of health inequities. Framing it around our future seems to be a very practical and sensible thing for us all to be considering. Thank you.
No problem. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Just in regards to the vaping, an interesting dynamic is how hard are currently Cancer Society lobbying central government around this particular issue. Because we see a boom, if you like, of vaping shops that are developing around throughout New Zealand. I think the latest statistic was something like about 2,000 versus about 600 big brand takeaway companies. And I'm just wondering, because we had a big issue within New Zealand a number of years ago with legal highs, and the boom that it developed around that, and it took quite a bit of legislative change to get some change around that. So is it something that Cancer Society collectively are doing and lobbying very hard through the process?
Absolutely. One of the issues that we have is that the vaping is not safe. Vaping, we have this issue all the time around vaping. For some people, vaping may be a way of helping them quit. But our concern is that vaping hasn't been around long enough to know the long-term effects. And if it was something that was a way of quitting, excellent. But what we're seeing is a societal response to vaping. We're seeing the proliferation. There's something like 700 vaping shops in the country. Now, you ask what we're doing. The first thing that we're doing is ensuring that we give the government full backing and support for the legislation we discussed today. But as part of that, the Tobacco Network will be putting a cautionary note saying this is fantastic. This is what we need. However, there is a concern, and that concern is being echoed by many councils. As I say, half the councils in the country are all putting vape-free policies in. I don't believe council doing that in support of people quitting. They're doing that because they are seeing vaping proliferate in their communities, and schools are presenting with issues. So the straight answer is we want to see the government take action. We don't in any way want to see this legislation knocked off course, but we do have a problem. I believe the country was asleep at the wheel. If you take the situation in Australia, they're looking at us and going, whoa, where are you going? So what we would like to see ultimately is the same response in vaping as we're seeing in tobacco, the licensing and reduction of the availability of vaping products to specialist vaping shops and the removal from retailers.
Wonderful. Thank you. You answered my question. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Nun. Really comprehensive. I enjoyed that. Thank you. And we'll certainly be supportive of your position.
Thank you very much for your time. Good afternoon.
Cheers. It's been interesting. We'll see if we can make the council meeting as interesting as the prior topics. So we move now to urgent business. Not aware of any. No. So identifications of matters of minor nature. So I've got some from Councillor Piddington and also Councillor Wills. So Councillor Wills, you were requesting an update just on the climate change position. And so we all just follow process, so we will deal with them at the bottom. And so I'll just in interest of time, I'll just run through these, Councillor Piddington, make sure I've got them okay. So stadium update timeline. Just an update on the town clock, where that's at. I know we've got some funding considerations in the plan today. CBD trial costs to date. And then finally, Callans Hill, and then just some process around the RMA decision, just to give councillors an update. So is that fully covered? Cool. Okay, so we'll deal with those at the end. Any conflicts of interest with the items at hand? No. Cool. So move now to confirmations of minutes. 7.1 on page 6. I'll just open back up. Move up, Councillor Wills. Councillor Gilchrist, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against carried. 8.1 on page 14, schedule of functions attended by Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillors. I'm happy to move that. Councillor Piddington. Thank you. Nice lad, yes. Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. 8.2, schedules of functions attended by Chief Executive. Councillor O'Reilly, thank you. Councillor Gilchrist, thank you. Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Move now to reports. 9.1, fixing of the common seal. I'm comfortable to move that. Seconder. Councillor Oliver, thank you. Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against carried. So move now to 9.2, which is adoption of the 2022-23 annual plan on page 22. And we'll invite officers up to speak to that report.
Good afternoon. So the purpose of this report is to present the annual plan to you for adoption and set the fees for the next financial year 22-23. So as you know, the plan was based on year 2 of the long-term plan. It does include some of the variations that have occurred during the year to Council's work programme for year 2. But as a result of sort of our assessment, we sort of assessed there were no significant variations. So we did no formal consultation, but did provide a summary document to all ratepayers and residents across the district via the Courier newspaper that summarised the key projects within the plan and what those variations were. We also presented to community boards and publicised the plan through Facebook and council website and the other usual mediums. So you would have seen that through the report we received 11 pieces of feedback on the plan, summarised in the document and in the reports and the attachments. And with those attachments, there's also officer comments that have been provided on that feedback. So you may wish to discuss that feedback and provide any further direction as appropriate. The report itself also includes some of the changes that have occurred since the draft plan was presented. So you can see those under section 14, which in some of those are sort of rephasing of projects as further information has come to date, and some of them we've also discussed in the last wee while, such as the Sirens project. So I'll pass over to Azora to speak to any financial matters and then open for questions.
Thank you, Mark. So as Mark said, there has been some minor changes since the last draft was presented. The key changes are really to reflect a recent forecast that was undertaken. Majority of it is rephasing or carry forwards. And also the changes in relation to the surplus is a slight change from 259 in the previous draft to 241,000 surplus, which is not too different. And also the capital investment total dollar value for 2023 presented here is 76.3 million. So the changes there, 4.2 mil overall. I just want to note also a slight change to the fees and charges document. There's a slight typo which has been since removed in the version that will go on the website, but that's just on page 51 of the fees and charges document. There's just a note on there, which is actually an internal comment, just to note. And happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Azora and Mark. So we'll just go to a couple of points. There is an addition to some funding for Pariora, and I know Pariora councillor isn't here today, but there was a request for some funding for that community, a small amount of $20,000, and I'll ask that Chief Executive speak to that briefly. And also we've had the request through the annual plan process for funding for Fraser Park or further funding. So I'll let Chief Executive just brief us on that. Also, just in regard to the Pariora funding, I see that we're looking to take it from the Cycleway Funding, knowing that there is going to be a request. One, I just want to confirm that we have carried the first 100,000 from last year over, so that's still available. But I do know that the team that are looking at the Cycleway now from Pleasant Point through to Cave will be looking for funding probably later in the year, and so potentially a lot of that funding does have to go through some process. But I'm just concerned that that 20,000 is taken from that funding because it's likely to be contested and used. Understanding also that there was some discussion in the Pariora meeting around cycleways, walking tracks as such, but is there something, my question probably, is there somewhere else that we can take that 20,000 from? But I'll pass over to the Chief Executive to give us some briefing.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So yes, the community meeting, I think it was the 31st of May at Pariora, there was some discussion around matters such as some sort of minor beautification and footpaths and so on. And so the suggestion has been raised that maybe a modest amount of money could be provided in consultation with community members down there, so that they have, there's input from them as to how it might best be put. To your point on the appropriation of that and where it could come from, the point really, Mr. Dixon's coming forward, the point really we want to make is there's no need for us to change the rate. It can be absorbed from somewhere within one of the existing budgets, whether it's the budget of Mr. Dixon's, we would, an amount of that kind, be able to manage it. So yeah, it's really to just signal that it doesn't need any sort of rate adjustment. And so we could allocate it from an existing budget. I just, Miss Andrew, are you able to, Andrew? Just in regards to Pariora, that 20,000 would be able to be put within your LTU budget for footpaths or within parks and reserves? Yes. So we,
Okay,
for an amount of that type. So we offer that up as something that arose between when the draft annual plan was put out and the when you receive it. And the other matter, of course, was in regards to the Fraser Park. We've set out in there some of the funding and where they're at. It's officers' suggestion that if council is minded to provide some funding to Fraser Park, that we go back and look at the options, because if we look at it from when we set the LTP, we did peg the numbers reasonably tightly to all four corners of the plan and work it out. So we would need to look at, in terms of where we're landing this year, it does look like a positive result, but we still need to go back, look at where we're landing and explore options to present back for council should we need to do it, because it would be by way of loan funding. Very likely anyway, it would be loan funded sort of money that council would have to go and borrow in order to do it, rather than via rates, your worship. So happy to take questions on those 2 points.
Yes, Councillor Pennington.
Just in terms of that bid, can I suggest we do get some sort of paper around that for the request from the South or the Fraser Park Community Trust for the increase, how that would work if we were?
Yes, I'm more than happy to provide a paper. It's really whether councils, do you want to see a paper first before you indicate how much you might provide? Because it's sort of a chicken and egg here. Do we, we can bring, so we could bring some options, I suppose, and model some options of various amounts, say where it is, and then have allow you to have a look at it and make a decision.
That would make more sense to me in terms of we can see the impact rather than come up with a number and then it.
Back engineer it. Yep, we're very comfortable to do that, Councillor Pennington.
Is there any, is there any further comment on that specific one, or are you comfortable with that approach that we see what the options would be as far as effect on funding? Councillor Wills.
Just maybe looking at maybe a couple of different models, whether it's a quarter, half, what have you, and then break it down from there. Is that what you're looking at there, Councillor Pennington? So we've got that direction. Yeah. I'd be more comfortable with that.
Thank you, Councillor Wills. Councillor Booth.
What level of funding are we at the moment? What quantum?
So we've got a grant for 1 million, I think, or there and thereabouts, and loan funding of $1 million. Yeah.
Yeah, so the fund, there was around about 260,000 or 250,000 left in when some restructuring of the arrangements was done 5 or 6 years ago. Then there was $900,000, not quite $1 million, given via the COVID fund a couple of years ago for the redevelopment. And then a loan which is yet undrawn of $1 million has been provided, either at 5 years or at 10 years term. And that loan is open until October this year. Our understanding is that the trust will likely draw that down. So some of it is grant, some of it is loan, and some of it is money that has been left in, if you like, for capital works that goes back some years. So there's sort of a mixed model there.
So is that 2 point?
Hold on one.
Yeah, you would be looking at about 2 point.
Sorry, Richard, could you just jump out?
2.3 million dollars in round terms by way of either money and grant and loan.
Sorry, sorry, Richard, can you just jump out for a sec and let Alan jump back and then, yeah, thanks, Richard.
So is that in return for security or what on that loan, I assume, or some lever?
We get security for our loans, yes.
Right.
But the enforcement is a separate issue.
Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Richard. In regards to the Fraser Park Trust request, it's I think we're all pretty au fait with the reality that you have to be born under a rock not to realise what's happening in the building industry at the moment and on projects that we are as a council involved in now and into the future. So the Fraser Park Trust is caught up in that the reality of living in the environment economically that we are now. So we'd have to look at that very, very carefully. I have no objection to getting a report back, but still won't make the decision any easier because if we responded to these requests forever, it wouldn't leave us a terrible lot of capacity to do the things that we need to do as a council. So I just make that caution, but look with interest at the paper that comes towards us.
Cool, thank you. So we're going to look to, and so when do you think we'll consider that? So we're looking at 250, 500 mil effectively, break it down something along those lines. Is that correct? Everyone comfortable with that as far as, and then we could look to see that, conscious that Fraser Park also already wants confirmation of funding so they can move ahead.
Yeah, we can, through you, Your Worship, yeah, we can model different amounts of funding in that order of 250, 500, whatever, and also maybe look at what it might mean per $100,000 or something like that in terms of the cost.
Yeah,
you know, if you do it. So the modelling, when it comes back, it'll be a number of represent a number of scenarios.
Okay. And then as far as effect on annual plan, we're comfortable that it's not going to have any material effect because it's loan funding effectively.
Yeah, quite right, because through you, Your Worship, the idea has been that we've stuck to the 4.9%.
Yeah.
The every intention in subsequent years of maintaining that as was set out in the long-term plan. So that's where the modelling sits, is how do we manage within that fiscal envelope.
Fantastic, thank you. So further questions on this paper in regard to the annual plan? Obviously we've been through fees and charges, etc. in draft form. Any further discussion? No.
Just on the Fraser Park thing, I just wonder if it would be appropriate if you resolved that request formally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Cool.
Officers report back.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll just make that E,
Yes.
officers report back in regard to funding options for Fraser Park.
Yep. Can we just note too?
Yep.
Sets the council, district council fees and charges as per the updated fees and charges schedule presented at the meeting. Just so it's clear which one has been presented, Your Worship.
Yeah, as per updated. Yeah, that's in regard to D. So the updated fees and charges that are in front of us in the report. So everyone comfortable? Any further debate? Someone comfortable to move that? Yeah. Councillor Gilchrist, Councillor Burt. Further discussion? Comfortable? Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. So move now to resolution set rates, which is on page 195.
Yeah.
Yeah. All yours.
Thank you. So obviously this is a formal document to set the rates for the 2023 year. In terms of the overall, it's at 4.9% as per the LTP. The resolutions obviously have been checked through legal lens as well. So we've reached out to make sure that it's all in alignment. Officers have also checked through the funding impact statements as well as the alignment with the various differentials as well. I'm happy to take any questions and open it to the floor. Thank you.
Thanks, Azura. Questions? Pretty okay. We could probably move through this. Councillor Booth, happy to move? Yeah, thank you. Someone else? Councillor Rowley, thank you. Any further discussion, questions? Feel comfortable? Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Too easy. Thank you. Appreciate all the work that goes in behind that. I know it's not just us signing it off. So now it's 9.4, which is climate change governance statement 201, and page 201. And we've got Rosie and Phil and Andrew. Welcome everyone. And who's going to kick in? Do you want to lead, Andrew? Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So yeah, this is really, I guess, following on from the workshop that we had recently regarding our governance statement on climate change. So this is really setting the line in the sand for our council's position in regard to climate change. And yeah, so I would pass it over to Phil Driver, who I think has a short presentation as well, just to explain a bit more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. So what I wanted to do is give you an update on what our next stages are going to be, assuming we go ahead with the endorsement of the government statement, so you can see how they're going to be used. So we're going to start with a public workshop, which will be very much focusing on informing people in our community, so we're all on the same page in terms of climate change. So the first workshop will have 6 components to it. The first one will be acknowledging the council's commitment to action through your government statements. Secondly, we'll have a session on explaining the science, so people are familiar with the science. The third one will be explaining the forecast impacts in South Canterbury, largely based on the report that was prepared for the Mayoral Forum on risk of climate change in South Canterbury. The fourth session, I think, will be really interesting. I'll be having some local speakers talking about what they're already doing on climate change. So there'll be the likes, I'm hoping, of Gary Aiken, who's Chief Exec at Timaru Transport, explaining what they are already doing on climate change. And when I spoke to about 50 leading stakeholders around the district, there was a lot of really good stuff going on. So it's going to be good, I think, to share some of that with everybody. I'd anticipate then a panel discussion with those key speakers, looking at the science, the forecast impacts and existing actions. And then we'll be inviting submissions from the public around climate change, leading to the second workshop. And so the second workshop will be identifying and prioritising potential local actions. So as I said, quite a few of those local actions are already happening, but this will be very much a listening exercise, drawing on the wisdom out there in the community as to what we can do on climate change. We will then run a series of mini workshops on specific topics, and I've just listed some of the likely topics there, because each one of these topics is a big issue in its own right. So coastal erosion, coastal inundation is a very, very large topic, particularly north of Washtike. Resilience of the water supply as the Particulate River becomes much flashier. We need to understand that a lot better, and that could involve a lot of catchment management involving a lot of farmers. Different ways of looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions from transport. Impacts of extreme weather on commercial food production. A bad drought could cost the area 100 million in 1 year, and so on. So the intention is the initial big workshop, getting people up to speed, the second one, hearing what other people have to say, and then a series of very specific workshops. And while we're doing that, we'll be distilling the climate change strategy, and we'll update elected members periodically as we do that. Probably the first key update will be late this year, early next year. So on that basis, we go back to the underpinning governance statements that will underpin all of that work. And just a reminder, these statements came out of the interviews I had with about 50 leading people around the Timaru district, saying they wanted the council to, put a line in the sand, say what their position is. We put some ideas to council at a workshop, and these were the three key statements that councillors seemed happy with at the time. We reworded them very slightly to take your suggestions into account. So I guess back to you, Andrew, to put forward the recommendation on the endorsement of these statements, government statements, and then we can get on with the other actions.
Yeah, it's just important to note too that, although we have talked to a lot of leading stakeholders, the community in itself has not had the chance really to comment on this. So what we're proposing in the recommendation is that the principle be endorsed for some community comment. That is not basically asking for submissions. It's just really getting their feedback on what they think, and then we can move forward on that and make some tweaks. So,
sorry, and to clarify, so that would be in parallel with the process which Phil has just set out. It wouldn't be a case of standing still to do that. People can absolutely comment as we also develop the strategy and get to the action end of the spectrum. Oh, and sorry, I can add to that as well, not on the slides, but we would propose to set up a place on the council website and an email address and all of those generic tools to give people the opportunity not only to engage with us in the structured way that we're proposing, but to continue to bring their ideas to us as and when they choose to do that.
Yeah, if you recall that during the long-term plan, this was a lot of interest among the community, and there was a call to, act and do more. So this is part of that process. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. Look, there's just one in regards to the governance statement, and B before me has done a possible reword. And in item 3, I've just got issue with the word support, and the reason why I've got issue with the word support, because it can mean financial support, and I don't want to hamstring us for later. And so a suggested change would be encourage others to learn and adapt. We will guide and encourage communities that are most vulnerable to climate change. To learn and adapt. So effectively it's to remove the support so we don't hinder ourselves. So are you comfortable with that? Yeah, sorry, I don't want to water it down, but I'm also conscious what people may use against us.
Doesn't limit us.
Yes, that's, yeah.
And certainly the word support had a meaning of encouragement. Anyway.
Yes, no, totally. And I get that. Yeah. So just to those changes, is everyone comfortable? Pass it on to Councillor Gilchrist.
Thanks. Mine's actually almost a typo, and it's just for those who are most and then least resilient. So see how it says most and then the colon, and then it says least resilient. So it's just a typo. Nothing wrong in the substance, just the typo. I thought, just so that it reads. Thank you. Yep. Most exposed, badly impacted, and least. Yep. Most badly least.
Further comments, questions?
Just Your Worship, as we were putting that in, did we miss a wording change suggested by you, Councillor Gilchrist?
Yes, it was to put in point 3 to put the colon after the word are, so those who are colon.
Yes.
And then most exposed to climate change.
Yeah.
Yes. Badly impacted.
Yes, I saw what that was.
Councillor Booth.
Yeah, look, I'm just probably a little bit concerned. The report to me seems quite extreme. And I think really we're looking for a midstream response to this. So there's some, there's some assumptions. Actually, pretty much all of it is assumptions. So, I find it quite amusing that we would be looking to spend money on a report which is actually 100% assumptions rather than factual. So,
did you want to give some? So I'll put you on the spot. Do you want to give an example?
An assumption of 0.8 of a metre.
Oh, yes.
Wildfires. Things like that.
More than welcome to make a comment or not. It might be safer to not. Andrew?
I guess that, the assumptions are made when you're predicting the future. And if you look at all the work that was done around coastal inundation and erosion, which we have put into our district plan now, that is based on assumptions regarding sea level rise. So this is really no different. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think through part of this process, and I certainly do endorse some education, and it'll be really interesting what comes from the next process. And we're quite real to the fact that there will be, there's some issues out there that whether you believe or don't is actually irrelevant, because we are going to see, we've had, more storm surges hitting TT, and is that going to be an issue into the future where it actually affects infrastructure? We know that at some point the wash dyke stop bank is going to have to be moved, the sea down drain will be affected, and so they're real and tangible things that are going to be affected by coastal erosion, sea level rise as such. So they are quite real things, so that we do have to do something in that regard, in education and planning towards them, because they're expensive. Moving a stop bank potentially could be tens of millions of dollars, and yes, it sits with ECAM, but it's also a responsibility of ours, and will be a responsibility for someone to pay for it. And that's quite an interesting question. Highlighting the need to secure our water sources into the future. What we can do around our catchments is really important, and especially with the light of what's happened recently. Sorry, any further? Councillor Pitting.
How are we doing this? Like, who's capturing this information? It's all very so we set up a website. To Steve's point, are consultants running these sessions? I mean, I'd like to know how this process is going to be handled going forward.
Yeah, no, good question. And costs is associated with everything we do, so it would be great to have a response to. Thanks, Rosie.
Sure. So Phil obviously is contracted to do the short-term program of work that you see there on the slide, and that's a reflection of the fact that we haven't yet appointed our climate change advisor. And I believe, oh, thank you, Andrew. Sorry, I believe that came up as a one of the minor matters earlier. So Andrew and I, we're going to be setting up interviews. We've got a short list, so we'll be cracking on with that next week. But we know it can take a matter of months, and people leave and all of that. So Phil's program will socialise this with the community and keep the ball rolling for the next few months. As soon as that climate change advisor is appointed, we obviously enter into some kind of a transition phase, but it makes sense for Phil's the discrete work program shown there to be completed. To transition it partway through wouldn't be logical, but there will be a handover once we have the internal resource.
I think, yeah, it's important to note too that, we need the knowledge and the expertise in this area to basically inform the community and have, I guess, their trust and respect from that community. And that's where Phil is coming into it. He is a recognised expert in this area. So we are using that as a platform.
And we'll also be taking full advantage of my new colleague, Jacob Mulholland, the Development Liaison Officer, and myself will provide any sort of administrative or logistical support that we can just do in-house. We'll undertake those tasks.
Thank you.
If I could just briefly comment, everything I'm doing, all my plans and any documentation I produce goes past Rosie and Andrew. So there's nothing happening outside of, what you're going to be able to see.
Yeah, no,
All
totally.
captured.
Yeah, I think it's one thing that is, topical, and I know we got really good support for it through the long-term plan, but I think as with all our projects, when we don't have really good governance oversight, we feel that we're not in touch with them, and that's when we get asked questions in the community. So I think just there's probably a real role, and I think I'm going to probably hand it to you, Councillor Gilchrist, but with yourself and your deputy in regard to environmental services, that you just have to look to have good governance oversight, and that's part of the planning and updates that we do, just so we've got some go-to people within council, and then I think that'll help the process and questions. So you're comfortable, I'm sure, with that, but I'll pass to you for questions or comments.
Thank you, and I think you're right. It needs really good oversight and governance, not only for elected members, but also for our community, so that they know that we're actually doing the things that we said we would do. And I just like to point out, as I often say, you don't have to believe in climate change. This is about mitigating and adapting and managing the effects of climate change. So it's like religion, you don't have to believe, but you still have to deal with the effects. And so that's what this is about. And so I think it's a really nice bit of work, Phil. Thank you very much. And if no one else has any other comments, I'd actually like to move that we accept this recommendation.
Yeah, cool. And so just
so ended the sermon.
And so everyone was comfortable with what those changes were. I don't have to read that back. Main changes to that item number 3. Cool. So have a mover. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Wills. Thank you. Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Do you want that noted? Yeah. Councillor Ruth, thank you. Motion is carried. Thank you, Phil, and thanks, Andrew and Rosie. Appreciate that. Move now to Timaru District Holdings. Welcome the team up. Sorry for the... I might have lied when I estimated 3:30. But who doesn't like sitting through a council meeting? So papers, page 219, and we'll pass over to Mark and Fraser.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, councillors. I'll start with the SOI, which will take as read. We have nothing further to add than what we've presented previously and what is in the report. So any questions?
Cool, thank you, Mark. Questions for Mr. Rogers? Councillor Booth.
So I guess that the only thing in there perhaps I couldn't find was the no surprises basis, but that may be covered by something else.
It should be there.
Yeah, I think it does somewhere, doesn't it?
It may be described in another manner. That's all. That was just a statement that I did note.
Can we come back to you and confirm that? Because it is, I'm sure it's in there.
Yeah,
council.
Further questions? Most people like surprises. No, Councillor, sorry.
Well, just as in page general objectives by let's see, D, keep the TDC informed of matters of substance affecting the group, perhaps on a no surprises basis.
Yeah, 6, objective, engage with council to ensure TDHL contributes to council's strategic framework, keep council informed on a no surprises basis of TDHL's activities. Yeah, point the top one.
Perfect, thank you. So any further questions in regard to statement of intent, or Councillor Booth, are you happy with that? Would you like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Booth. Yes, Councillor Gilchrist, that's a second. Any further discussion? No. Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Brilliant, thank you. So move now to 231, which is item 9.6 and the quarterly report.
Thank you. Financial performance is tracking ahead of budget with property on track and dividend from associates ahead, and we anticipate this to continue to year end. Cash surplus saw a 500k dividend paid in May, and a further 500k repayment will be made to the TDC cash advance facility before the end of this month. You got anything?
I guess I'll just add, the combination of those interest payments, dividend payments, it's a total of about 3.2 million that TDHL has provided to TDC this financial year. So pretty pleased with that. But don't have anything else to add, so welcome questions.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Councillor Booth.
Yeah, just wondering how Alpine Energy is tracking in regards to their performance and perhaps an improvement in their dividend.
They've it's been a dry year it's been a wet year, which has reduced the load and demand from the irrigators. So that's had, that has an impact. But we've done quite a bit of engagement with the board, with management of Alpine, and increasing our understanding and our role in that investment. So we've invested quite a bit. Also working, as noted, a lot more with the other shareholders through engaging on the statement of corporate intent and identifying the long-term critical issues that Alpine face as an organisation and in that wider industry.
So I guess from a point of view of a community, we're sort of looking to, obviously with electrification, a lot of stuff, obviously there's a lot happening or potentially happening, and especially for us in regards to our infrastructure that will be required in the future going forward for the electrification, I guess, of almost probably quite a few key locations in order to, to participate in the changes in regards to fossil fuels and the use of electric cars. Has Alpine actually started planning towards that?
Yeah, without a doubt, it's one of the big issues on the radar. And just recently, central government's issued or created some more funding for organisations to assist them to transition from fossil fuels, especially around that process heat area, to transition out of fossil fuels onto electricity and electrified boilers. So it's happening, and it's going to happen a lot more, and Alpine are well aware of it and are factoring it into all of their planning and their systems.
It's also part of the letter of expectation process where we're engaging with the other shareholders at the moment and setting that as one of the areas to understand, particularly the impacts around the capital outlay that they'll have to put into that area and the overall impacts on the financials and balance sheet from that.
It's just become apparent that if you're looking to install a power charging unit you need a lot of power in certain locations, and obviously that's probably a key for our CBD going forward, that we actually have that line's ability to facilitate. It's the place to have it, so it's sort of coming, and so therefore it'd be good, especially when it's a community-owned facility, or which obviously the owners will be hoping that they are actually planning towards accommodating what their requirements will be. Thank you.
Councillor Piddington.
the report looks backward. I've got the two right gentlemen in the chair at the moment. Could we have an update on the South and Stafford Street and whether you've decided that whether the Lone Star's a restaurant or a bar?
South Stafford Street, the original timeframe was to have an update for council by the end of May. The contract negotiations, we were asked for an extension, which I advised His Worship about, and we should be able to have an update on that very shortly.
I suppose, on the Lone Star, we're pretty clear in our position that it's that the commercial negotiations between TDHL and Redwood are commercial negotiations, and as such, we don't undertake them in a public forum.
So you're still maintaining your position that you had in public?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. And sorry to put you under pressure, Mark, very soon. Is it a month, 2 months, 3 months? Because we've been told
2 weeks.
Okay.
Yep.
And how will you update us?
We will contact council directly. TDHL will go through His Worship and the CE.
Thank you.
Yeah, it will be coming through.
Okay, that's right. We might even see if we can time for you to come in and talk to us. But on to the right time, Dave. So, any further questions? No. Okay, so we need to move that report. I'm here to move that, Councillor Piddington. Thank you. Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So now 9.7, which is annual report.
Yeah, and I believe this is a procedural matter, so we'll take the report as read, noting TDHL met all statutory deadlines.
Thank you.
Yeah, through you, it's very much a procedural matter. It was presented to the shareholder at the AGM, and we simply are now, at the request of our auditor, just simply presenting it to council formally. So purely procedural.
Perfect, thank you. So we'll still ask if there's any questions. Otherwise, I'm happy to move that. Happy to second. No, all okay? Sorry, don't want to miss anyone. Yeah, put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you, team. Appreciate that. Nice to see you. So we need move now to VT. Unfortunately, we have an apology from Nigel Davenport, but we will still address the reports. So that is on 274, which is 9.8. So quarterly report. We'll take it as read, but is there any commentary potentially that anyone wanted to highlight, or any questions that we can go back to our VT with? But otherwise, yeah, no, comfortable. Well, I'm happy to move that the report for that period be noted, received and noted. Thank you, Councillor Wills. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Move now to page 290, which is 9.9. Statement of intent, and we have seen this before, so it is somewhat procedural as well. Signing this off. So is there any commentary or? We all seem to have moved back to paper a little bit. It's not sure. Oh, Councillor Griffiths, don't like that. I know. Yeah. Yeah, my iPad freezes on the big stuff. Oh well, 9.9, I'm here to move that as well. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Gilchrist, thank you. Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Then we've got 9.10, which is 301. Thanks, Jason. That's just moving the timeframes for the statement of intent. back to, I think it was the 26th, but I'll pass over to you, Jason.
Thank you. We've just signed off TDHL and Timaru's SOIs. The Aorangi Stadium Trust is also a CCO of council. So this report, we're currently working on it, and we'll take it to the trustees in the next few weeks. And under the Local Government Act, we got up to a month to advise council. So we're just requesting that we have permission to delay the delivery till the next council meeting, and then we'll come back with the Aorangi Trust SOI.
Cool. Well, I'm happy to move that. Councillor Wills, thank you. Any questions? Doesn't look like it. Put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. And then trust annual report 302. And just receive a note. Any discussion? I doubt. Not the most exciting doc in the world. No, comfortable with that. Give a mover for that. Councillor O'Reilly. Councillor Lyon, you happy to second that? Thank you. Put the motion to the floor. Not to say that financial documents aren't exciting. I apologise. Some more than others. Sorry, put the motion to the floor. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. So we've got no urgent business. Then we've got consideration of mine and nature. We have Steve, the climate change advisor. I think we sort of got an update on that. It's as Rosie alluded to, that's being dealt with at the moment. So I think we've covered that. We'll move now to, and feel free, Councillor Biddington, since you raise these, to talk to any of those, but we'll move maybe to a stadium update and timeline. Perfect timing. Mr. Dixon, come up the front, Mr. Dixon, if you like. We'll put you in the hot seat. So thank you. And so this is a little bit on the back of a couple of requests via the annual plan, just as far as timeline and are we going to meet those deadlines? And so can we, and I know we discussed this last week, but can we just get a public update on process and timeline for the stadium? Thanks, Andrew.
Right. So this is in regard to STEC.
Yes, that's correct. Sorry, yes.
So what I've got is a bit of a memorandum here, basically giving some detail around the project, what we've been doing, what is planned, and also some timings in that. So we are in the early stages of this project. And what has happened is that when the LTP was adopted, it was assumed that the existing stadium was structurally fine, and therefore we could just add on extra courts to that. Since that time, well, of course, there has been the earthquake assessment done on that building, which has shown that it is earthquake prone. There is also some other structural issues that have been identified, particularly around the lounge area, when the floor is actually propped up at the moment. So that, of course, we looked at that and did some estimates on actually how much it would cost to bring that building up to standard before you even get anywhere near the actual additions, extensions. It was then thought, well, an option is definitely we need to consider, and it is only considered at this stage, is a new build. Yeah, because you can get a purpose-built stadium, it could bring it up to a very good standard. Remember that one of the objectives of this is to get a facility that will meet the needs of the community, and it's more than just sporting community as well. It is, you need to consider cultural community as well, and that. And for the next 25, 30 years, this is sort of building. So a new build I see as an opportunity to at least consider. From that, you need to, in order to make an informed decision, you really do need to know the cost. That is one of the key things. Can we afford as a community a new build, or should we simply take the option of fixing up the existing stadium and then doing the extension? So there were some concepts done up. The concepts are just for costing purposes. We're talking about general concepts. It's not any sort of final design by any stretch of the imagination. And we're waiting on those costings to come through. At that point, we will be putting, I guess, a paper up to council and providing, I guess, the alternative option that is available and the costs associated with that. So that's really where we're at the moment. There is a timeline that is being planned here. We do need to improve our communications around this project. That is something I acknowledge, and Councillor Whittington definitely noted that, and I agree entirely. And we do have to move forward in preparing a stakeholder engagement plan as well, and it will come around to working with the groups, and there are groups already set up to look at the design side of things and what it needs. The other aspect is the procurement strategy, which we need to look at that as well. There is two options there. There is the traditional build, which is employing an architect, doing the design and then putting it out to construction, versus a design and build option. There is pros and cons with both options. I'm not saying either one is better than the other, but you just need to be able to look at what is the impact of those decisions. Like, I will say that in Timaru, there is very few local contractors that can do design and build. There's only one. So if you do go down that road, then you are locking out your local market a bit. So we just need to be aware of that. So I will hand this out and take any questions.
Brilliant, thank you. So just for clarity, I'll let you hand those out, but so just for clarity, the LTP, we signed off effectively on call it an extension, but I'd call it a new build off to the side, if you like. So six courts. Now we're considering, because of issues associated with the existing stadium, so I'll try and give clarity for the media that we're now considering is the option actually better to put a 9-court stadium. That would be correct, isn't it? So to keep the full amount of courts. So what we agreed at LTP was 6 courts. What we're now considering, because of the issues with the existing stadium, is up to 9 courts, a whole brand new build. And process still needs to time. Obviously, we've got some milestones. Sort of what we effectively agreed with the community is that we hit the deadline, was at 25, Councillor Whittington, and that's in regard to the need for the hockey turf to be renewed. So that's sort of a deadline that we have to sort of hit in some shape or form. And so timeline is to come back, and then costings, because the public will be interested in this. Do you think some rough numbers on costings would be how far away, do you think?
Yeah, we're expecting the costings in next couple of weeks.
Next couple of weeks?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'll go now to Councillor Whittington and then Councillor Wills. And sorry, just one point that I did make, and we haven't run this through council, but Councillor Whittington is currently a governance member on the project steering group, and I had decided to jump on that myself as well, just to have some governance oversight with Councillor Whittington, but we hadn't. I'm just conscious that we hadn't brought that through council. But Councillor Whittington and then Councillor Wills.
Just for clarification, I thought we'd passed that we were going down the design and build path earlier as a council. So the fact only one Timaru firm is available shouldn't hold us back from considering that, because I understand there's 3 or 4 in the South Island that could deliver a design and build type scenario and have done so successfully elsewhere. And I guess my other question, Andrew, is will we be able to deliver it within the time frame that we've told the public?
Well, firstly, I'll answer the design and build. The resolution that was passed at the LTP meeting was to consider design and build. It wasn't actually approved as design and build. And I think we will definitely be considering that. And I guess that will be partially a decision for Tenders and Procurement Committee or for council, which, but I think we need to have a little bit more background personally around that, and acknowledging what the risks are. Because you could get some potential savings by going a traditional way. I'm not saying we've made a decision either way on that, but I just believe there needs to be a little bit more information around that. As far as the timing is concerned, it is planned to start construction late 2023, and it will be finished 2025.
Cool, thank you. Look, and I think the consideration, good that someone reads the minutes, is around, let's not do things the way we've always done it. And, let's consider these projects where we're spending tens of millions of dollars, is there a better way? And I think that's the key thing, is what is the best way and how do we best deliver on plan, both financially.
We want best value for our community at the end of the day. The funding available is tight, and I think we do need to consider every cost efficiency we can get.
Yeah, look, and I think people will be realistic. The fact that we do have the considerations on the other stadium that, we won't be delivering a nine-court stadium within the existing budget. There will be, we will have to relook at the numbers, which seems to be a everyday occurrence. But it seems to be the nature of the beast at the moment. So, Councillor Wills.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. I must say I'm a wee bit nervous about this. If we're looking at extending the build and everything else, I can see that we need it for the community, but in the current climate, especially with the way budgets are going and costs are increasing, we need to have some real open transparency with the community, because obviously the ratepayer is going to be looking at this and saying, are we affordable as in a council? Can we make this a part of the process? And what is going to be the cost increase expected? And we talked about early on with the bleachers down at the Bay and the increase in that as well. Well, here's another event that's going to add multi-millions of dollars, I reckon, on the extension and everything else that's wanted. So it's going to be really interesting to see some of the costings come back. Have you got a rough figure at the moment? I'm just curious.
No, I haven't got a piece of it.
Don't answer that question.
What I will say is to bring the current building up to code is around about 5 to 10 million. So we're going to be over budget right from the start.
Correct. So when we're looking at a brand new build of a whole purpose-built extra courts and everything else, you're going to be looking at extensive amount of money.
It is.
Yeah. We're talking tens of millions.
And one of the options is that we stage it a little bit better. So we add 3 courts initially and then another 3 later on. I know that's not quite what the community is expecting or wanting, but it might be the reality to keep within affordability constraints.
That's where I think our community is going to be looking at it as far as ratepayers are saying, what can we afford now? And, what's acceptable?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to wait for the report. Thank you.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So further discussions, any requests for further courts out at Timuka? No. Pretty heavy out there. No worries. Councillor Fittington, you're all good with that. I think we'll move on. Good update, thank you. And we'll look forward to further updates. We'll go now to, hold on, we'll see. Yeah, town clock. Who was that? Was it Nicole? Thank you.
Approximately 3 months ago, we actually had it working. So there's been some extensive repairs and maintenance. It's a very old system. In fact, there are no parts in New Zealand now. So we had it working. We thought we'd fixed it. We've been with a traditional clock repair from Christchurch. It stopped. That was our final option. We are now costing the parts in England. That is the only place we have left to actually put what is a rather large mechanism that drives all the quite heavy arms on the 4 faces of the clock. If that fails, we are going to, or too cost prohibitive, we are going to have to look at the entire mechanism inside, probably replace the arms to lighten them so that you still get the same effect, but it's just we need to take the weight out of the arms and replace it with a different system inside. So we're expecting those costs, hence the reason why we've carried forward. We were hoping they would have been with us. So Philippa Steins has just informed me that we're still waiting. So I will follow those up for you. We want this repaired, hence we left the money in the budgets. But it is a very old system up there. But there's a couple of other complicating factors as well. But
and any advice for those relying on the clown talk, the town clock? Excuse me.
It's right twice a day,
The
Or
very infamous past entrepreneur who's now no longer with us said, well, you know, even a broken clock's right twice a day. So we've got 4 faces, so 8 times a day, it's correct. But not to
Council-
be facetious about it, but we are trying to fix
Yeah,
it.
no,
where
and
are.
we recognise the issues. That's not easy. I mean, it's interesting though, and I was talking to Councillor Piddington and let you go in a moment, but you know, some people you think, oh, you know, the 4.9% rate increase is the be all and end all, but no, some people it's just the clock. And if we can get that working, that would be great. So
Very
but
much appreciate it. Yeah.
understanding that it's it wasn't made yesterday. Councillor Piddington.
I've got 3 votes relying on you getting that clock going, Nicole.
We've got a lovely cleaner here at OCS who's also comments every time she comes through. Oh, I used to tell the time by that clock all the time. So I appreciate it.
I did actually have a question from an elderly gentleman whose name I couldn't remember and asked whether they could form like you have the Pleasant Point Railway, whether there would be a group that could look after and nurture the clock because that's what they're into.
Yes, yes.
Which would have some cost savings as well as.
So it's certainly open to having others come. As we've got quite a traditional clock maker who manufactures and makes the parts, but we're really struggling. But certainly, it's a working at heights. It's an interesting environment to get to. So we've got a little bit of a health and safety around what we do and how we access up there. But certainly open to any help. More than welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the update.
Thank you. Sorry, and Councillor O'Reilly, apologies.
No, that's fine, Your Worship. Just an update. Thank you for the clock, but it's moving clock at the moment. I'm just going to bring that up. It is faceless, as we know, and it's been repaired. So it seems to be a district-wide problem with our clock. So I know it's in hand. So, but thank you.
No comment, but I don't have an answer for you, Councillor Earl, on that one, but I will chase that up for you and find out what's happening. Let's get the time going and across the district, catch up with Geraldine.
Tamika and Timaru are stuck in time. Right, I think that's enough on clocks. Let's go now to CBD trial cost update. Thanks, Rosie. Yeah, sorry, go for it.
Okay, I'm happy to report, Councillor Piddington, we're under budget. So let me start. I'd actually also like to start by saying that they have no end of trouble with the clock on Community House, and they're regularly told about that one by people in reception as well. So we could have a clock action group trial within the city town strategy. So the total, to give you the budget, so we have approved variations for trials already. And the total value of the approved variations is $185,906, of which we've got $65,906 for the Strathallan corner, which is completed, $40,000 for code breakers, and there's $80,000 sitting there for a trial which hasn't run yet, which is Deconstructed Carnival, or they're renaming it Bite-Sized Recreation, which is a bit broader. So plenty of budget there. The total spend on trials to the end of May 2022 is $80,206.80. Of that, you've got $67,179.20 on Strathallan corner and code breakers. You can split that down further and say there's about 40,000 spent just on Strathallan, and then another portion just on code breakers, and then there's about 12,000 within that. Where you've got some comms and engagement and evaluation and monitoring costs that are better conceptualised as shared across the projects. So yeah, so for Strathallan and code breakers, we could have spent $105,906, but we've only spent $67,179. That might sound like quite a big variation, and the reason for that is that the budget that we had available for code breakers allowed us to do a second iteration with a new storyline, depending on popularity. It has been super popular, but the decision has not yet. But we've had Brian was telling me we've had over 200 bookings and over 1,000 people doing it so far. It's had amazing reach on social media, really good data back on the trials. So we could use a little more of that budget, but we haven't made that decision yet. Strathallan is finished, so it will remain under budget, and the report is available on the new website, which you should check out because it's amazing. So I said $80,000 spent, and that's because there's another $13,027.60 which has been spent on early concept development preliminary work for that wider trials program. And that's because obviously there's a bit of work that goes involved, that's involved into bringing something to you and making a case for investment. However, of that 13,000, we can claim just under $5,000 of that back from Waka Kotahi because it's gone into the funding the foundation streets for people. So happy to take any specific questions.
Councillor Pillington.
I guess the question came about, there was some concern of the costs. So what was the total on Strathallan Corner?
So as I said, it's a bit difficult to, I can tell you the spend that is dedicated to only for Strathallan Corner and covering nothing else is $37,731.70. But you've also got that 12,000 across code breakers and Strathallan that's covering some of the shared comms and marketing and things.
What's the total budget for the trials through the inner city? Because I have had people approach me concerned how much we are spending before we actually get round to doing.
So the approved variations, 185,906. However, obviously we've had the strategic framework has now gone out to the public, which contemplates a much bigger program of possible trials, which do not yet have committed budget.
Or funding approval.
Or funding approval. However, having said that, if we were to commit funding to doing all those trials, that would be within the available long-term plan budget. There is no proposal on the table to do anything that would require an increase in budget.
So, sorry, Councillor.
Final question. So the trials could end up costing over $1 million. Would that be?
That will be at the discretion of the council. Yeah, those decisions haven't been made yet.
So they haven't costed the rest of the trials. Is that right?
Yeah. Andrew, I don't know if you want to comment. Things have been costed, but I mean, we could add in, for example, Waka Kotahi may choose to approve upwards of $1 million for a road corridor trial, looking at connections between the waterfront and the CBD. Now, if they approved that and they gave us that $1 million+ worth of funding, then I'd have to say, yeah, sure, the trials are going to cost more than that. I don't have a crystal ball. Yeah, I can't tell you at this time.
Remember, the Waka Kotahi funding is 90% subsidy rate, so yeah, we're only paying 10% of that. So if we do get $1 million, cost $1 million for that particular trial, then it's in reality only going to cost us $100,000 of actual ratepayers' money.
Yeah.
So for Joe ratepayer out there that doesn't understand a trial, why do trials at all? Because, we get criticised for, why not just rip up all the tiles, replace them tomorrow? Why trial something first? And just use any example. It doesn't have to be.
I think there's quite a lot of case study around the country. If you go to the Wellington cycleways, the speed limit reductions around the Dunedin, there's a lot of those things where council has elected to implement something and the community don't like it. And then what happens? It has to be changed. There's a lot of rework required. The purpose of these trials is to gauge, I guess, the community's support for the particular initiatives that we're employing. So, and it's trial means it is temporary, means we can change if we have to. It's about being adaptable. So, we could simply just close Stafford Street right there. Would the community like that? We don't know. And if we do it, if it's not a trial, then potentially we have to change everything back again. So we need that information. We need that data.
Yeah, the short answer is a lack of consensus. If we have consensus on something, that's fine. We don't need to test it. We might need to have a conversation about whether it's a priority, but we don't need to test it. But taking the example Andrew's given of the closure of Stafford Street, when I was handing out brochures about the Strathallan Corner trial, and I was going in and out of every single business in the block between the Piazza and Strathallan Corner, and it was almost 50-50. One shop I'd go in and they would sort of, why haven't you pedestrianised it? Next shop you'd go in, we need longer parking outside our building. So there isn't the consensus. So that's why we need to trial. And again, Strathallan's a good example. We had a really vocal group of stakeholders wanting that site bulldozed and reoriented. But when we did the trial, a whole lot of people started saying, actually, I eat my lunch there. I want the trees. They're giving me shelter. They're giving me shade. Don't you dare. I'm really upset. We still don't have consensus. Let me be quite clear. Those two camps are both there. But by doing the trial, then our decisions become more defensible.
Can I just?
Yeah, Councillor Finnegan.
Sorry, Barbs, can I? Yeah, I guess that's part of my question, because I think even after trialling, you'll go into those same Stafford Street retailers and they'll be 50-50. I mean, a mate rang me and said we were brave and pedestrianised our main street in Whangarei in 1974. So 50 years later, we're kind of getting round to it. And it's not a criticism, but I mean, we're elected to make decisions. Yes, that will give us some info, but I don't think it'll give us a pathway.
I think that's where one of the things that we've said we will do with every trial, and Strathallan's a good example, and do have a look at the report because it's up there on the website. It doesn't just include feedback from the community, and it was tricky because it happened during COVID and there's all sorts of variables, but it's collecting the data about pedestrian counts or FPOS transactions, so you get that hard data as well. So yes, everybody might still disagree, but we might be able to tell you what sales did in that block over that month or something like that. So it's having all those other data points. But yeah, you're right. It's a little bit like negotiating with blackmailers.
Councillor Gilchrist. Sorry, Councillor Finnegan, can you just jump out?
Oh, just about trials. Are they also perhaps really good for helping prepare the community for change? Is that another benefit of trying things? Is, you know, we're relatively conservative here, and maybe it shows people the potential or some of the opportunities. Perhaps.
Yeah. 100%, and it is about brand as well, because the heart of the whole framework is about inward migration. We need more people to support our businesses and the social and cultural activities we want. So yes, it is about exposing people and giving them the chance to trial, but it is also about that brand and identity. And if, for example, we were successful with Waka Kotahi and got some funding, we would be one of only 2 South Island councils getting that recognition for our innovative approach. And it would be cool to be able to say, if they do it in Christchurch, we can do it here. We are absolutely up with that. Yeah, and we did have, when Strathallan Corner was in, I went down one day and had a chat, and there was a family there from Christchurch on beanbags who commented, oh, this is cool. We didn't know you did stuff like that down here. So, yes.
Thank you, Worship. Just a wee question. I mean, following on really from Councillor Gilchrist's one, I mean, I guess the same applies to the building owners, you know, to see the trials, see the potential, maybe get excited about some parts of it and maybe not others, but see where they fit in as landlords and building owners of the CBD, and give them a way forward for their potential spends on their buildings, which of course is something that we won't as a council be spending on. That is the building owner's responsibility, but give them a lead in and a knowledge of what they can do. Would that be a fair observation or not?
Absolutely, and not just the, I don't want to diminish the importance of our building and business owners. Yes, absolutely, but also, so some of that interim concept spend, the 13,000, that's having conversations. We've got really good support from the likes of the YMCA and Sport Canterbury, because there's a role for groups like that to play. Council doesn't want to infinitely be funding youth activities, perhaps in the CBD. Well, we have conversations with them to say, well, what could we enable? What could we unlock? What would get you guys up and running? So it's that wider community as well. And we have had good, really good support from the stakeholders we've already got on board.
Thank you. That is good. I think comfortable with that. So we got through Enterprise. And then can I ask maybe Mr. Cooper, I think, in regard to just the RMA process? Thanks, Rosie. Andrew?
Happy to answer any questions, Your Worship.
Yeah, cool. So, Councillor Billington, you can give some background. So I guess we're conscious that this is a live decision that has not been made by a commissioner in regard to an RMA, but could you perhaps talk around some process around what would happen with, or did you want to, how do we paraphrase?
Yeah, look, I guess I'm interested, Paul, in gifting of land to the council, whether someone can just give it to us and we have to take it. And if it does go towards who makes that decision and the process of it.
Right. So I'm happy to discuss no particular case, but just what you've stated there as a scenario, which is it's reasonably common practice across New Zealand under the RMA for applications for subdivision to be accompanied by a gifting of land. Gifting is probably not a helpful term, but what it actually is it's an offsetting of negative impacts on the environment that development may cause. So when that's brought into the process, it has to be assessed, and it's done under the provisions of the RMA, and it's about those competing tensions, I suppose, as to the negative effects of any development against the benefits or amenity value of any gifted land or what it may provide. So it may be that when that's taken into the grand scheme of things and weighed as part of by an independent commissioner, which is how we would do these things if a matter is limited, notified or notified, that independent commissioner would be weighing all those factors against the Act and the district plan and coming out with a determination. Now, I think what you're getting at, Councillor Piddington, is the fact that council can be vested with land without the political or governance body having a say in that. And that is quite possible. And in fact, it's probably very intentional through this process that because it's a statutory process, a decision-making process about the weighing of evidence and competing interests, property rights, and any number of other things, it has to be seen and it has to be independent and free from that either perceived or actual interference from the political arm. So even though you raise a good point, the law says that yes, it is considered by an officer or a consultant planner who may be engaged on our behalf if it was one that we were looking at. And that process is then a recommendation is made or found based on the information that's acquired through the process of assessing that planning application. And then, as I said, typically for limited, notified or notified, we'd have an independent commissioner consider all those facts and come to a decision. And at that point, governance may have a say in how that land might be used or not, if it were gifted or vested. I think vested's a better word than gifted.
And that's the issue, isn't it? You know, lots of people want to, you know, let's use the Cycleway, you know, from out to Point. It's a great example. Community group, you know, raise the funds, great for the community, but there's an ongoing cost, and we get vested that land, and there's an ongoing cost, you know, to council forever and a day, which is, effect on rates, which is in essence is great. But, is there an opportunity if we don't like what is vested to us, can we appeal that through this process?
Well, I think no, but once we own it, we own it. And then
property rights associated, you could sell it.
Then you have those property rights that are associated with it. However, I think the conditions of the consent would be binding, and that it was vested typically for a purpose, and that was to offset the negative effects of a development. And therefore,
so examples, maybe, land could be planted. Is that, maybe so views are, or stormwater, playgrounds.
It's always a case by case. There's no one size fits all. So, and if the land was part of an application process and it has to be considered under the RMA, then it would be whatever the value of that particular parcel presents, not monetary so much as amenity and offsetting of those negative effects that the development would bring. And it's that weighing exercise that we have to, when I say we, the governance arm has to be mindful of, so that it can't be seen to influence any particular outcome. And we maintain the sanctity of the process, if you
Can
like.
I give an example? Say someone wanted to gift us a second scenic reserve, and you put the road in, and there's associated cost for the right rate part ongoing. So governance doesn't get a choice on that. We just have to suck it up.
It would depend what your intended use for that land was. But I
know you're being careful.
It is what it is. I can't comment too much because we have a live case that's still open, and I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Piddington. But however, the law is the law, and we have to maintain a distance from that decision-making process until it's made.
Look, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. I just wonder where governance sits in these things when they're going to have ongoing costs to ratepayers. That could be quite major. That was all.
That's interesting. Any further questions, Councillor Burt? You okay?
I think you just answered it. It depends what the offset is, because the conditions of the consent will dictate how you can use that land and what it's for. So a lot of times for amenity value, it might be a green space or something like that. Once it's locked in, you have no ability to dictate concerns. But at some stage through that submission process, if you believed that land was not going to add value or something, you are able to make a submission in a hearing process.
In a notified situation, anybody can make a submission.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Cooper. Very good update. I think I covered all the minor nature items. Appreciate that we've run over time. We do need to confirm some minutes in public excluded in just a moment. Just wanted to note, I know I said that I've joined the project steering group with Councillor Piddington. Also I've asked Councillor Lyon to jump on the project steering governance group for the Theatre Royal. And I just wanted to note that in public, just need some governance oversight for no other reason than I think that's important. So we move now to public excluded for the minutes. So I'm happy to move that. Councillor Wills, you look like you want to second that. All those in favour, please say aye.